2:37. Anyone over there wants to come by, have a seat? Yeah. Welcome, welcome. We're being recorded, so just so you know, yeah, don't say anything bad. My name is Carol Baldwin, and I am filling the really hard shoes to fill of Laura Schmitz, who is normally our moderator and has been our moderator for a long time. And she isn't able to do it, so I'm stepping in. So please, I'll do my best. I wanted to welcome welcome you to the League of Women Voters. If you're not familiar with the League, I'll just read. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, and I want to emphasize that, nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues. And that's one of the reasons we're all here today, to learn more about the public policy issues affecting us. The League is a group of women and men who believe in the power of voters to make a difference and to advocate for good government at the local, state, and national levels. We have a website, so you can visit Weston League of Women Voters, and we have all sorts of calendar of events. Actually, we include events that are happening in other leagues around us. Reading has a league and often sponsors very interesting events. To emphasize that we are not just women, but men in the league, even in the steering committee, I wanted to introduce Harry Falber. Harry Falber.
Say hello.
Harry Falber, who's not paying attention, I'm introducing you. Also known as Mr. Patty Falber. So he's going to be manning the League of Women Voters desk there. It has some other steering committee members. We have a special deal today that if you sign up to become a member, you'll get a free pie, a little hand pie, not the big pies. And there's sweet ones and savory ones, and that's being sponsored by the League. So please consider becoming a member, because then you'll get our emails, and it's just a great way, I think, these days to get more involved in politics in this, and just be part of the discussion. So I just want to also mention that the pies that are over there are by Christina Madison, and she's a longtime Westonite, the daughter of Tom and Kathy Fela. And she has a lovely little bakery in Georgetown. It's called the Old Mill Bakery and Market. And so honestly, her stuff is delicious. So if you're interested, if you don't become a member and get a free pie, you can go over there and purchase one. And she has drinks there too. Also, what I'd like to ask is that everybody today be polite and civil and not too long-winded. I don't actually have a timer here today, but if people's remarks or questions can be about 3 minutes, that would be great if you have that in your head. If you guys are not civil and polite or too long-winded, unfortunately, I'm going to be the bad guy.
You're going to take the pies, aren't you?
I'm going to get like the, pie in the face, exactly. So anyway, I think Laura was better at that than I am, but I'm going to try my best. So I think I'd like to introduce who we have here, who I'm so happy. We were supposed to do this at 12 today, or 11:30, but then sadly we had a big loss in our community of Dick Troxel, so his funeral was today at 12. It was very well attended, so we switched it to 2:30, and very graciously these guys switched their schedules too. So let me introduce you to State Senator Will Haskell, and State Representative Ann Hughes, and State Senator Tony Wan. And I think what I'll start with, if you guys don't mind, is I'll give you more than 3 minutes to each of you just explain what you think were some of the most important things that happened in this last session of the legislature. And that's part of why we've had this in the past. We used to call it, I think, the legislative wrap-up, but we changed the name a little bit to Politics and Pie. We thought that was a little sexier. But anyway, but part of it is the session just ended, so these guys can tell us what happened, and then we'll open it up after that to questions. And this is also a virtual event, and so if you want to watch it or you want to someone couldn't be here, they'll be able to go to our website and look at it later. So I guess I want to start with Anne as the
Okay.
as the woman's first.
Well, first of all, let me thank you. I'm so humbled to be representing all of Weston and to represent you in the legislature during this short session. It was short, but we got a lot accomplished. We prioritized climate change because really we fell down on the job in the long session to do enough about the climate crisis. I'm going to let State Senator Will Haskell, who is the head of transportation in the Senate, talk a little bit more about the specifics of what we did pass. But I am really proud of that. We also passed an amazing budget, which prioritized, again, those most hurting during this, inflation, economic crisis, pandemic. We really reckoned with the disinvestment in childcare across the nation, but especially in Connecticut. We reckoned with the needs of our schools for safe ventilation, and we really looked at what we have disinvested in as a default, and where we need to prioritize our tax dollars as well as tax cuts. So we extended the first ever child tax credit for those families up to $300, I think it is, for families that are eligible, that are low wealth and middle income folks. We prioritized extending and expanding the earned income tax credit, and phasing out completely state taxes on retirees for their pensions, for their Social Security, for the IRAs. We wanted to say we see you, and we see that this is a time of need. So when the gas prices spiked, we passed a cut in the gas tax across the state, and we also prioritized free public transportation, free buses throughout the state, and then we extended that until December 1st of this year. Again, the people in this district may or may not use public buses and public transportation, but we all use healthcare and shopping and first essential workers services that are in the adjacent communities that do rely on public transportation. I work at a nursing home where a lot of the workers use public transportation. I'm really, really proud that we, in response to the dismantling of Roe v. Wade and SB 8, Will Haskell and I just came from a reproductive choice rally in Wilton. We passed the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, that not only protects our right to bodily autonomy and protects our reproductive rights here in Connecticut, but protects those who are seeking refuge from other states where they have been criminalized. That includes their providers as well. And as I said in the rally we just left, I will stay by your side in the streets, fighting for your rights and your freedoms as long as I am able to, because you elected me for such a time as this.
Thanks, Anne. Tony, can you finish?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see everybody in person. I think if I had to categorize some of the important things that we did, I think we need to acknowledge all of our efforts, municipal leaders, the community, on how we have managed through COVID. It's been over 2 years, and I encourage everyone to get their vaccines and get boosted. I am optimistic that we are moving on to a new phase of how we're handling this pandemic. And I think it's important to acknowledge how far we've come, but how much further we still need to go. And I know as the ranking member in public health, that is first and foremost in regards to creating an environment where we're balancing being able to kind of continue to a new normal, but at the same time maintaining the safety and the public health of all of the people that we represent. So that's really important. And I would say how we've handled COVID is one of the biggest policy issues that we all have to handle, not only as state legislators, but municipal leaders, public health workers, and the community as a whole, and our businesses. I think one of the offshoots of that is the fact that we, in a legislative session this year, passed a truly comprehensive and bipartisan mental health package. We had three comprehensive bills, which the committees that I served on had significant input. Make no mistake about it, mental health has been an issue throughout and a challenge even before COVID. But what COVID did was exacerbate and really heighten the need, particularly among our youth. And so, what we did in Senate Bill 1 is address the issue of mental health as it relates to our schools. So, we created more funding for school health centers, but it's a whole array of bills, Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 2, which came out of the Children's Committee, looked at a comprehensive aspects of evaluating behavioral mental health as affects our young people. We're proud of that. It's bipartisan. The third bill, which is House Bill 5001, came out of the Public Health Committee, which I'm the ranking member on, and it looked at a whole ecosystem of healthcare delivery in public health. And I'm also the ranking on insurance, so I had some input in mental health parity. So make no mistake about it. I think we made a budgetary investment. I think we also heard the clarion call that mental health needs to be on par with all aspects of our public health delivery. So I hope that this is not a one stop and moves away from it, but I think we have learned our lesson, and we have heard the parents and many of the people that have called out for help during these pandemic times where isolation and the unique challenges of COVID posed to people's mental health and well-being, that we are taking this and bringing it on par. So that is truly bipartisan, and I'm grateful on that. I think the third is really addressing our economics. We've had 2 years of economic challenges that have been kind of slightly camouflaged by the unique circumstances in which we operated. Billions of dollars of federal largesse in regards to the American Relief Fund that has supplemented our budget and supplemented our programs. What people don't fully understand is the federal ARPA money gave billions of dollars to the state of Connecticut, which allocated to the services and supplemented our budget. But we also had federal ARPA money to go to our municipalities to offset some of the challenges that they had. That's another pot of money. We also had a third pot of money in regards to ARPA money that went straight to our Board of Educations. So there's just a lot of money that went in. And the concern is it truly sustainable when a year down the road that we don't have that cushion? Are we heading toward a cliff where these kind of programs and these kind of things that we're implementing still need to continue? So that's the challenge that we have. I've always said this when we had the debate on mental health, I said, this is a worthwhile investment. Absolutely. But we also need to do a better job in prioritizing our budget. When you look at budget and priorities, it's $24.2 billion. There's a lot that goes into it. In fact, 673 pages and 531 sections. To me, we need to reprioritize what our priorities are as a governance in regards to where we spend our money. I think the other important part is I truly believe we're not out of the woods yet in regards to our economic recovery. Many of our small, mid-sized businesses continue to struggle. We've done little things that make a positive contributions. For example, as the ranking member in planning development, we've been able to kind of create some leeway with municipal input in regard to outdoor dining. Just as we're out here right now in this venue, it really is a new kind of way of conducting ourselves in meetings. Another thing that I was involved in and talked about is to be able to have virtual meetings in our town governances. But we want to be conscious of the mandate we impose on our towns for such a new way of conducting transparent businesses. And I think the other issue is we have kept our education budgets. and held our communities harmless. Now, I know that Weston doesn't get a lot of the money compared to other towns, but we have also done a far better job in reevaluating reimbursements for excess special education costs. That was one thing that we heard in last year's forum that was critically important. I'm happy to report in this budget, we've kind of reformulated the percentages of reimbursement on excess special education costs. I think we need to do a far better job of that. But in regards to education, I think we are at a good place in regards to being able to fully fund it and provide the programs that are necessary. And I think another aspect in which Will, and I was previously, I'm still involved in it, the Governor's Workforce Council, to take a look at, as we look at curriculum, we look at skill sets, we not only look at four-year colleges, that we look at developing skill sets that are needed in the 22nd century is a vis-a-vis healthcare, coding, or vocational technical programs. So being able to have an educated workforce, and I know that Will, as former chair of higher education, and I work quite significantly in looking at apprenticeships and various other areas of developing skills, creating curriculums where kids love and instill in themselves a love of learning and be able to truly get skill sets that can sustain them in a career path long into their career. So I think it's a privilege, as Ann said. It's a privilege to represent the people in the Connecticut General Assembly, but at the same time, it's equally important to come back to the district and be able to hear the needs and the challenges and to be able to represent them up in Hartford.
Thanks so much, Tony. Will?
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to the League for hosting us. I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be outside on a beautiful day, and just feel tremendously honored to have had the opportunity to be your voice in the state Senate over this most recent legislative session. I also value the League in its ability to bring us together and talk about areas where we agree, areas where we may disagree. I disagree with my good colleague on the budget. I certainly respect his vote on it. I ended up voting the other way, and I want to tell you a little bit about why that is. I see a budget that delivers for every generation. The headlines on this budget were $600 million in tax cuts, the largest tax cut in Connecticut's history. $3.5 billion to pay off our pension debt, a huge help for Connecticut going forward. As many of you know, we have just been so struggling under the clouds left by previous generations with unfunded pension liabilities. It hampers us in everything else that we want to invest in. Not only are we fully funding the promises that we're making to current state employees, but we're seeing excess revenue and paying down that debt so that the next generation doesn't face that trouble. And by the way, we know that the next economic recession is around the corner. So rather than seeing more money and spending more money, we're putting $3.1 billion aside into our rainy day fund, so that when the next downturn happens, as it inevitably will eventually, we won't have to raise taxes or dramatically cut services. And that provides families and businesses alike with a sense of fiscal stability. But beyond those sort of big number headlines, I think that this budget delivers in tangible ways for every generation. You think about a kid that's going to be born in Connecticut tomorrow. There's a 1 in 10 chance that that child is born into poverty, that it doesn't have enough food to eat. That's why we created the child tax credit. It puts $125 million into the hands of 600,000 families, a $250 tax credit that helps them to put food on the table. And by the way, we expanded the most successful anti-poverty program in the country, the Earned Income Tax Credit, so that more families can benefit to the tune of an additional $49 million a year. Eventually, after that child grows up a little bit, it'll be time for the parents to find childcare. And we hear from our constituents, all of us, all the time, that families are overwhelmed by the cost and they're underwhelmed by the options. So this budget puts $89 million into improving childcare facilities, increasing pay, and increasing the number of opportunities for high quality childcare, which very often determines the rest of that child's life. Then it'll come time for that child to go to school. This budget puts $75 million in renovating HVAC systems, something many of us fought for. It sounds really boring, but every one of us knows what happens when, unfortunately, school facilities don't receive the love and care that they need, and what can happen when classrooms aren't healthy and safe. How can we expect students to learn if we're not investing in upkeeping those actual sites? but it's beyond just physical health. This budget invests in 24/7 mental health units that can be deployed when a student is experiencing a crisis, or somebody of any age is experiencing a crisis. But I say student because how many times have superintendents come up to us and said, students are walking into my classroom with anxiety and depression, and yet there's nowhere I can send them. There's no services available. This budget changes that. And by the way, it invests, as Senator Wong said, historic amounts in special education and bilingual education, so that we keep that promise that no matter what needs the student walks into the classroom with, we're prepared to serve them. As they get a little bit older, that student's going to think about going to college maybe. This budget expands our free community college program, not just for full-time students, but now for the first time for part-time students as well, so that the cost of earning a degree, it doesn't hold anybody back in pursuing their career choices. And then as they get a little bit older, after they get out of school, they're going to commute, hopefully not that quickly. They're going to start, they might notice on their commute that this budget spends tens of millions of dollars on making our trains a little faster than they were 50 years ago. It also spends $28 million on improving cell service along Metro North, because even if that train isn't going to be 30 minutes faster overnight, I know a lot of people who would appreciate the opportunity to Skype or Zoom or just answer emails rather than sitting in those dead zones. It fixes our long, inequitable, and unaccessible car tax. You guys will remember the fact that my Subaru, which is registered in Westport, because it's registered in Westport, I owe hundreds of dollars less taxes than my neighbor in Bridgeport who has the exact same car. That's patently unfair. It's the very same property, subject to drastically different tax rates. And the impact it has is that it makes car ownership unaffordable in the cities that are most struggling. We equalize that. So a Subaru in Weston and a Subaru in Bridgeport are now going to pay the exact same amount in car taxes. That's not by increasing your car tax. It's by bringing down Bridgeport's. It is going down to 32.46. Great. So let me just finish with saying that eventually that student's going to want to retire. And this budget invests in seniors in a historic way. Representative Hughes, who's a champion for seniors, by the way, both in her legislative life and her non-legislative life, mentioned this. We're one of only 13 states that taxes income on pension payments and annuity income, and the legislature started to phase that out, credit where credit's due, before I got there. This budget accelerates that phase out. So next year, seniors will save $49 million a year in tax cuts. And we know when I go knocking on doors, seniors tell me that on a fixed income, they're having trouble affording property taxes. So this expands our property tax credit and saves an additional $69 million a year, not just for seniors, but for everybody who pays property taxes. This really is a budget that looks out for every generation. And I've gone on for way too long, but there's a million bills I want to talk about. I want to talk about Connecticut's Clean Air Act, which I was so proud to work on with all of my colleagues, trying to address the fact that we have some of the worst air quality in the country. I want to talk about the abortion legislation, which makes sure that in this state, we always respect a pregnant person's right to choose and make decisions about their own body. I want to talk about more niche things like increasing the cap on solar energy, or getting more folks to take their commercial driver's license test, folks who are incarcerated nearing the end of their time behind bars, so that they can get a high quality job in an industry that's desperately in need. There are a lot of great bills that passed this session. And I guess my theme or my wrap up is that this legislative session made me feel really optimistic about Connecticut's future. And I think all of you should feel optimistic about where our state is headed as well. While Washington is talking about problems, state governments, we actually get to solve them. How many times have you seen MSNBC or CNN or Fox News talk about paid family or medical leave, raising the minimum wage to $15, free community college? We did all those things in Connecticut. Thousands of people now have access to 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave, making sure they have time to bond with a newborn. Hundreds of thousands of people saw a raise when we increased the minimum wage to $15. And something near and dear to my heart, thousands of students are currently pursuing a degree that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to pursue thanks to our free community college program. So I'm endlessly grateful to work in a state, to live in a state like Connecticut, and to work in a state capital that you give me an opportunity to speak on your behalf every single day. I'm so honored to do this job, and I'm feeling more optimistic than ever before about our state's future.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to segue right into, since you guys were talking about students, we have a couple students here who are going to ask questions.
Yay!
So I know, Casey, you've got a question. Are you okay? Do you want to come up here so you can be on camera? And then I think there might be a couple other students too. They can go. Stand right here so that we can see you. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sit. All right,
Morning.
so especially since COVID, air quality in our schools is an important issue. Is this something the state leaders plan to address? And is there maybe a possibility that there will be state grants available to cover some of the costs associated with this? I'm Casey Lerner, by the way. I'm a junior at Weston High School. And yeah.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you so much.
You guys
Thank
want to take this?
Is there 60 million?
75 million.
Okay.
75
I
million,
knew you would
Casey.
know.
It's in the budget. There are absolutely grants available. And I know my hometown of Westport, just around the corner, there was absolute chaos when Coleytown Middle School had to close down because of an HVAC system that had been overlooked. Mold had grown in that school, and children weren't safe showing up to the classroom every day. So everybody had to cram into Bedford Middle School. There were much higher costs in the long run, not just costs in terms of impacts on the students' education, overcrowded classrooms, but actual physical costs. They had to go out and buy trailers and make all sorts of interim investments. It's not just the right thing to do to make sure that classrooms are healthy. It's also the smart thing to do. It saves us money in the long run. So yes, this budget includes $75 million for that.
The devil's in the details, and I fully support better air quality in our schools. And as the other senator in Westport, we went through the Coleytown experience, and the safety and health of our children when they go to school is critical. That being said, in public health, we vetted this bill. We got input from so many other shareholders. No doubt, the objective is bipartisan unified. But the challenge is the money that's been put in is actually a start. Because as we've learned from Coleytown and many of our schools that are built in the 70s and maybe in the mid 80s, the fact that HVAC systems are outdated to the current standards that we have. And the other part of it is we no longer create open environments in regards to being able to open our windows and have air circulation in a natural way. So when you look at any schools that is looking to completely or upgrade their HVAC system, you're talking about a significant cost. And unless the state puts into their school construction calculus, I'm extremely concerned that it's going to be an additional municipal mandate to our communities. And we're going to separate out between communities that may be perceived as having the economic capability of footing that burden versus picking winners and losers in regards to the implementation of it. No doubt, we all agree that better air quality is critical. But the challenge is, are we going to implement unfunded mandates to our municipalities to meet these standards? My adage has always been in the committee to say, yes, let's do it. And I want to acknowledge Representative Jonathan Steinberg, who I worked with in the public health, he as a chair and myself as a ranking. We agree with that. We learned from the Coleytown experience, but we also looked at the cost differential. And we were able to redo Coleytown with significant state funds and construction funds to allocate that. Unless we create a structure and a system in which the state says, you're right, but it is part of a collaborative cost burden sharing and not impose it on our municipalities. That's one of the critical sensitivities that we need to have when we look at anything that we mandate that's willing. But again, as I went back, the mental health component, the mobile units, these are critical. And I believe that is a commitment and a priority that we need to fulfill. But when we come with air quality and a big cost of school construction items, we need to have a roadmap to ensure that the funding's allocated before we implement and impose these mandates on our municipalities. I'm extremely concerned that Weston and many other towns may bear the brunt of that cost on its taxpayers in the local municipalities, unless we as a state make that commitment in writing and bottom line in dollars too.
Well, I think as Senator Haskell characterized, it's a down payment. It's an investment. It's not the end all of, our tax receipts are coming in better than expected, and we needed to make an investment. This was a bill the teachers were very much behind, and that's why I supported it. And this investment, initial down payment on air quality in our schools, because we cannot expect our teachers to teach in what is literally unsafe conditions.
I think we have some other students here.
I would welcome
Would
them.
you like to come up and ask a question? Come on. Yeah, you can come together. Yeah, come on up together.
Miss Rice's third grade.
Okay, great.
right.
All right, perfect. Come on up
Hey.
so you can be on camera right here.
Welcome.
And can you each say your names and what grade you're in and what street you live on?
My name's Lucia. I'm in third grade and I live on Lower Highway.
Okay.
My name is Sochi. I'm in third grade and I live on Hybrid Trip.
Okay.
My name's Charlie. I'm in third grade and I live on Old Hybrid too.
Great. All right, thank you. And you guys have one question together you're going to
I want to
ask?
make sure they can
No,
see.
we have
Each have one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Why don't you start us off?
Um.
And speak loud so everyone can
Okay.
hear you.
So some of my friends, their moms don't have jobs, and I really think that we should help them get jobs, so they can help get a home and a car, and yeah.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you. You want to do all three?
yeah,
questions?
okay, yeah. And so that's about moms getting jobs.
I love
All right.
it.
And what's your question?
And so some of my friends like to to school,
Speak loud.
and some of them want to walk to school.
Mm.
Okay. All right. So a
Safe
question about
sidewalks.
sidewalks.
Okay.
So kids can walk to school. And your question?
A lot of people have been
Yeah.
hitting animals, like on the road when they're driving. So maybe like
Something could do about that.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm concerned about all the animals that are hit on the roads in our town. All right, great. You can stay there and listen, or you can go back and sit down and we'll hear from the senators.
I'm happy to too, but do you want to start?
Why don't you start, Ann?
I am right with you about moms and dads getting good jobs, good paying jobs. That's why we raise the minimum wage, but we know that's not enough. That's why we have to invest in childcare, safe and quality childcare, and really a good pipeline so that people can decide where their talents and their gifts are valued and their time. So we invest in workforce development. We invest in the platform to employment program for folks that are out of work and want to come back to work and want to maybe do something different. And my office is always trying to help people that reach out and say, you know, where's the small business portal that I could see what's going on, and how can I get help to find a good job for me? So I'm happy to help your neighbors and your friends and all of my constituents find the right job for them that pays a livable wage. And I'm on the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and we work hard to raise the floor so that everybody has a livable job, not just a minimum wage job.
And what is the current minimum wage for the state?
We're moving into 15 an
15.
hour in October, right?
In October?
So-
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not enough for living here in Weston and Easton and Reading.
And I just wanted to say, I love that you talked about moms going back to work, because I grew up with a single mom who worked really, really hard. And that we know that the pandemic, it's been hard on every family. It's been hard on kids, but it's especially been hard for women in the workforce. A lot of moms haven't been able to go back to work, and part of it's childcare, part of it's a lack of economic opportunities. But we really do need to focus on exactly what you identified. There's a whole council in Hartford focused basically on getting moms back to work and figuring out what's holding them back. So let's continue the conversation. Maybe you can come and talk to the council too. I also, just since Ann focused on that question, I just want to say something about sidewalks near schools. This is really a partnership between the state and the town government, because whether or not there's a sidewalk, it sort of depends on whether or not it happens to be a state road or a town road. But let me just say this. I have this really fun job of being the Senate chair of the Transportation Committee. And when people say transportation, they often think about cars. But we're trying to change that in the Transportation Committee. It's about getting where you need to go safely and efficiently. So for some people, that means driving a car. For other people, it means walking to school or walking to work. For some people, as Ann mentioned, it means taking the bus, a bus that's now free. For other folks, it means riding a train every day to their job or to their school. So we've got to think about all forms of transportation, not just cars. And that means building more sidewalks. And we start with the schools for sure.
Nice. So true. So the sidewalks at the schools are coming in the summer. And we had a meeting last week with the Department of Transportation, and they will fix, that terrible crosswalk that leads from the Onion Barn to the town center. They're going to fix that up with a flashing beacon, and we're going to have sidewalks that come up from St. Francis Church and come across town, Weston Road, and then go over to School Road, and then goes up to School Road by the schools and connects with the existing sidewalks. So there'll be a continuous sidewalk that can lead you from the crosswalk to town center or to the church all the way to West.
And that work's
And the
going to
middle
start
school.
this summer.
So we're going out to bid next week. So
That's
yeah.
Yay. Well, it's always great to see young people, really young people, get engaged. In regards to the sidewalk, I know that in the legislature, we did pass out some considerations in regards to pedestrian and bikeways to be able to create more opportunities. I think there were other components of the bill that came out of the Transportation Committee, which I supported in regards to crosswalks. And because one of the offshoots of the pandemic is the fact that speeding in our local roads have really been accentuated, and we got used to during COVID when there wasn't traffic, and now we're back to some degree of semblance, but nevertheless people forgot there are other people on the road and pedestrians. So and we have the continual problem of distracted driving. So I think we have to do a much better job, and here's an interesting point. It is within our community that we need to be conscious of that. I think the second point in regards to the workforce, it's critical. Will and I both work on the Governor's Workforce Council, looking at unique skill sets. It isn't just a preset box of skill sets that are in need nowadays. But I think the other important component that we addressed a little bit this legislative session is childcare. The fact that for many of our parents, the compromise between going into work and leaving their children and not having the appropriate care from the standpoint of the proper environment, the proper background, the proper support mechanics, it's a trade-off a lot of our parents make in staying home to provide home-based and support for our children. So I think we have to do a far, far better job in addressing childcare in order to supplement the challenges in the workforce dynamic. In fact, it's important, and it's across all spectrums of our economic scale. One of the bills that funding mechanisms that I really supported was Care for Kids. Well, believe it or not, 3 years ago, we cut it out of our budget. What Care for Kids did was allocate funding for single parents to be able to have supplemental funding to child care centers. We cut that because at the end of the day, it looked like a budgetary item, and if you're not engaged, you're not fully aware and placing childcare and the dynamics and the consequences of it, you make a cut. So we're able to restore that because it's important. If a parent can't have the comfort that their children are going to be safe, that they're going to be able to get the proper loving care that they would get at home, they're not going to risk it. So childcare is a critical, critical concern. The last thing I'll leave with you is the fact that we got third graders here. I can tell you in Fairfield, we had a whole class of third graders who wrote to the legislative body that wanted to make lollipops the state candy. And I know, when we have the throes of legislative battles about critical issues that are important, the most important lesson was these third graders that are now fourth graders have written letters. They have come up to the legislature. They have been imbued with a tremendous sense that they are part of the legislative process. And I will dare say that they have taught important lessons to many of their parents and many of the adults, because for many, not those that aren't here, but many people feel as though that the political process has left them and that they don't have a say, they don't have input. unless you're paid by lobbyists and special interests. What those third graders, now fourth graders, have believed is the fact that even as young people, that their voices matter and that they will be heard. So that's a beautiful lesson. I couldn't resist it. And unfortunately, the lollipop did not get taken up by the Senate.
And I think I can maybe address, even though I'm not one of the panelists, the concern about animals being hit on the road. Um, just in saying that in our town, we have an organization called, we're really lucky, an organization called Wildlife in Crisis. And I don't know if everyone in town knows about it. So if you see an injured animal, you can bring it to them in town. It's on Indian Valley Road. And I know Amy Jenner, one of our select women, has worked there quite a bit. And they take in birds, mammals, reptiles, I think even, and it's a wonderful resource in our town. And people come from actually surrounding towns because it's unusual to have a center like that just in our town.
Hey, I just wanted to address who was the one who was concerned about animals? I am so proud to represent you as a member of the Animal Advocacy Caucus in the legislature, and we prioritize legislation and policies that help our animals, because guess what, we represent all the species in town, not just the humans, right? And so one of the things that I know our friends at Lashot and the pollinator pathways are very pleased is that we passed a chloropyrifos,
Say that 10 times.
I don't know how to say it, ban, and
Neonicotinoids.
yeah,
Oh my
that one,
gosh.
which harms. It's a pesticide that we've been using, unfortunately, a lot on golf courses that harms our animals and our environment and our bees and people and our water quality. And I know Weston has dealt firsthand with water quality issues, and so we need to take statewide action to protect our animals and all of our species. So we finally got that over the finish line after several years of really pushing hard for it. But one of the things we didn't get over the finish line, along with the state lollipop, was making the shelter dog our state animal.
Yeah.
And there are many of us in the Animal Advocacy Caucus that are very upset about that, and we're going to try again next year. Yeah.
So some of our this is not only live, but it's also a virtual event. So we're getting some of our virtual attendees asking some questions.
Perfect.
And one thing I wanted to mention though, before I ask one of these questions that's being called in, is it true that virtual meetings for towns are going to be able to keep going on? So
Yeah,
can you
baby.
address that a little bit? What's happening with that?
Absolutely. Well,
all at once.
I'll just say that I'll be super quick. I serve as the vice chair on the Government Administration and Elections Committee. Senator Wong serves on the Planning and Development Committee. This touched both of our committees, but we all believe, you're all here, so you all believe, our government is better when more people participate, not fewer. And if there is a silver lining from the last few years of this terrible pandemic, it's that more people have had a chance to participate in the policymaking process at the local, state, and federal level than ever before. We represent communities that feel a world away from Hartford, but all of a sudden, people could actually testify in a public hearing while cooking dinner for their kids, while putting their loved ones to bed. They were able to testify from the comfort and safety of their own home. And we saw firsthand as legislators the value in that, and we wanted to make sure that it continued to be an option for towns. So just in the nick of time, as the Senate tends to do, we passed legislation that allows for towns to continue offering remote options.
My favorite part of that is that you get to engage in holding us accountable more. More people are paying attention. More people are watching those public hearings and CTN from their home and calling in and showing up and testifying. And as the vice chair of the Aging Committee, we've never had this kind of participation before, from our nursing homes, from our hospitals, from workers that otherwise could not take the day off, or patients, and come to the legislature and say, why it's important that we have virtual visitation, for instance, allowed, why it's important that we have an essential caregiver that somebody in a nursing home can designate, why it's important that we have accountability for our temporary nursing agencies. So we heard firsthand what's really happening in the trenches, and our policy was able to respond to that directly because of virtual hearings.
You're right, Will and GAE and myself in planning development investigated this issue. It's interesting. This is a continuation of the governor's executive order, which he implemented under the emergency powers. What most people didn't know was the fact that this exact bill was inserted into last year's budget. 1,000 pages with very few hours to review. It didn't pass out of the committee. It didn't pass out of either house of the Senate or the House. It was inserted into a mega budget bill that had nearly 50 other bills and tremendous details, 1,000 pages by one vote. I was incredibly frustrated by the lack of real transparency in that process. And it happens all the time. And in fact, it happened this year in this budget as well. But I am happy to report the fact that this year we passed out the bills as standalone to codify it, with the important caveat that it is optional, that it is not a mandated public, virtual hearing, that the town has to give ample notice. But another critical factor that I pointed out in our planning development committee is that that this will now require audiovisual and digital technology in order for storage, in order for camera work, in order for a lot of the mechanics of creating a digital virtual access. The state of Connecticut had to learn the process. But my concern is for those municipalities, maybe smaller towns, that don't have that capability. I remember 7 years ago, we actually had created a grant called the PISA grant that allowed a lot of our municipalities to be able to apply for the grant, to be able to install cameras, to be able to have, the Weston TV and the Fair TV, the public access TVs. My hope in this bill, and hope that next year we will consider that if we're going to make virtual hearings an integral part of our democracy, which I support and believe in, that again, the state needs to make the financial commitment to ensure that our municipalities have the funding and resources to create a truly up-to-date, accessible system. Because if it's not working and you don't have broadband, then the system may not work with true transparencies. But again, you hear it all the time. The devil's in the details. But nevertheless, the concept is sound because it ultimately gave our local municipal leaders the option, and it is not a mandate from the state. But we haven't addressed the funding issue. Maybe Weston has a capable audiovisual and digital technology, but I can tell you the town of Scotland in eastern Connecticut, not a chance. And if we're going to impose it as a state statute and a requirement, then we truly have to make transparency and government participation accessible for everyone.
I have a question just with that. Can some of that funding go through the COGS? And then be programming through the COGS?
It's an interesting question,
Just a
but
quick
the
question,
challenge with the
yeah, I
COGS
have it.
is
And just for, what are the COGS, for anyone who doesn't know what a COG
Council of
is?
Government.
It's the
Council of
Council of Government. So it's, think of that as the regions. Each municipality has specific regions that they do things, don't be shocked everybody. We do things regionally all the time. And we get together our council, our COG, called the West COG. And it consists of Weston, Wilton, Ridgefield, Reading,
Stanford.
Stamford, Danbury, Newtown? Is Newtown in there?
yes, it is.
You're located in Newtown.
Greenwich, Darien, God, New Canaan, And I'm missing somebody, but you get the idea.
The reason
Bethel
is
might be.
because we don't have county government. So
Right.
how are we going to aggregate our population to qualify for federal grant money, some of the federal infrastructure money? And so this is really considered some infrastructure for the government now. Like Tony said, broadband is now an essential service. It's not a luxury; it's essential service. So how can we funnel maybe some federal funds as well as some state funds through the COGS to provide that
Yeah, I
type
think
of
it's more
support?
hardware. So I think
It's
what
hardware,
Tony,
exactly.
What Tony says is it's more about hardware.
Hardware.
I think, our community is very fortunate. People they can facilitate the hybrid or the virtual meeting fairly successfully. We never stopped doing special town meetings in person. We just did them outside, so we never had to maneuver that situation. But I was just curious if there was a openness to that.
Yeah.
We all got your lesson in the pumps.
Thanks. I just want to, for anyone who arrived after the beginning of the meeting today, if you have any interest in becoming a League of Women Voters member, and we have male and female members, please visit our table back there. Lisa Broadley can wave. And if you join today, if you become a member today, you get a free hand pie. From Old Mill Bakery, which is underneath the tent there. There's sweet ones and savory ones. So it's a little incentive. And so please consider it. Let me ask this question that came from one of our virtual attendees. The question is from our beloved Margaret Wharton.
Oh, hi, Margaret.
Is no longer in town, but she's still very involved in town. She said, I think we are arriving at the, quote, silver tsunami, unquote, of retirements of the longtime public employees of the CGA. I guess that's Connecticut General Assembly. Did the legislature deal with this issue during this past session?
Yeah, I mean, we very much believe that at least I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but that we need to staff our departments with qualified, experienced personnel. We saw during the pandemic how much we rely on our engineers, on our hospital workers, on our teachers, on our Department of Public Health officials, on our departments of corrections. These are all essential workers that we rely on for that invisible government, Department of Labor, to process all of our unemployment claims. And with the silver tsunami, we did pass some legislation that automatically refills some of those, that starts right now in trying to backfill some of those retirements so that we don't have a significant gap in services. There are people depending on these state workers for all kinds of things, like I say, sanctity, if you will, roads and bridges, and we can't afford to wait to backfill that. We need streamlining that, and you could talk about the transportation.
Yeah, I'll jump in on the roads and bridges front, if that's okay, Tony. So 1 in 6 state positions are currently vacant and need to be filled. That's a huge number for everything that Ann said, right? Whether you're looking for an unemployment check, whether you are looking to get your license renewed, whether you're looking to make sure that your loved ones are cared for, perhaps in a state facility. This leaves a lot of families in the lurch. I focus a lot on transportation in my time in the legislature, and I'm very concerned that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act sends $5.4 billion to Connecticut, a game-changing investment from President Biden's administration to help us modernize our rails, our roads, and our bridges, to help speed up Metro North trains, which I'm a broken record about this. You've heard me say it today a few times, but I'm going to keep saying it, are slower today than they were 50 years ago. We finally are on the verge of changing that, but we can't do it unless more men and women sign up to work for the Department of Transportation. There are 300 job openings right now in the DOT. 300 job openings. I've gone and toured their offices many times, and there are just too many empty desks to meet all of the needs and challenges and opportunities of this historic moment. So If you or if somebody you know is interested in applying for the DOT, let them know that we passed a bill that makes it easier than ever. We deployed a recruitment program to public and private universities because we're losing too many folks to the private sector. We're losing them at the internship stage because our internship wages haven't increased for more than a decade, and they can earn a lot more in the private sector. So we are growing the internship program, we're increasing recruitment, and then finally, we're expediting the hiring timeline. Right now, if you apply for a job at the DOT, you might not hear back for 6 monmonths. Chances are you're going to get
You're gonna
snatched
go
up by a
somewhere
private
else.
company. You're going to go to another state. Texas offers people jobs on the same day that they meet them at a recruitment fair. We're not quite going to that level of efficiency, but we are saying that the DOT has to get back to you within 90 days of making an application. We hope they'll get back to you even sooner. We're removing all the bureaucratic hurdles that make state hiring sometimes too slow and needlessly inefficient.
We're talking about Department of Health and Addiction Services. We're talking about critical services. We're talking about departments of corrections. But I want to say the student loan forgiveness program for public service, we extended that too for certain sectors that we are really looking at a workforce shortage, to offer tax credits and subsidies to folks that are going into those fields that we really need. And we passed prevailing wage laws so that we can hire from within Connecticut for that little girls' families that are looking for jobs. We want to hire here. We don't want to outsource and pay top dollar, premium dollar to outside contractors. We want our workforce to be the first and foremost fully employed with the kinds of benefits and supports that they deserve.
Labor force demands exist for all spectrums, for all industries, public, private. It's an important issue that we are addressing in the Workforce Council. That being said, the retirement surge that you're going to see this upcoming year, I know we have disagreements in regards to the state employees contract that was passed along partisan lines. We have disagreements in that. But if you really look at the crux of why we're going to have an increase in retirements, is because we have brought our pension payouts from the state to a new band of employees that would expire June 30th. I've had 4 retirements in the caucus that I know on the Republican side because they worked 15, 20 years, and they're going to take advantage of the pension and the numbers that they're going to get that would be significantly different after June 30th. The second part that is critical is understanding the unique dynamic of service delivery in Connecticut. We have an unusual structure that exists in only 3 or 4 other states in the entire country. We have a dual delivery system. So our great nonprofits like the Kennedy Center and various other organizations that are the bedrock of our community, that provide critical services in a wide array of needs, they do the duplicate dual service of the state agencies. But the problem is they're paid and reimbursed at a significantly less level. Our nonprofits operate on bare bones and the support of private donations and contributions. Here's the challenge. If we're looking at workforce maximization, we need to look at a model that delivers the maximum return to the taxpayers' dollars. We have not done so. And to have a dual delivery system that doesn't exist in 45 plus other states is a system that we need to look at. I was instrumental in requesting a study that 7 years ago that looked at our nonprofits who did the same job as the state agency. And the report said that our nonprofits do the same job with the same standards and the same quality at 50 cents on the dollar. Why have we not done more of restructuring government to create a greater efficiency on our tax dollars while maintaining the critical state services that are necessary? Why have we not looked at that? We had an opportunity of a budget that a lot of people can take great pride in. We did some really good things, but we continued to do business as usual, in my mind. We had a great opportunity of a contract negotiation where we could have said, look at some workforce reassignments, look at some maximization, Now, Governor Lamont has done a good job in looking at using technology to create delivery services. One of the benefits we've learned is your driver's license renewal. You can get it online now, right? Beautiful. Why are we not looking to create a more efficient government rather than saying we need to hire and pay more? Look, I want to maintain the same quality of service and delivery, but I want greater accountability and a greater respect for taxpayer dollars. We cannot continue with business as usual. And that's my frustration with this is we had a great opportunity to look at revamping our workforce initiative to create a workforce dynamic where we can maximize and create greater service delivery. But unfortunately, I believe we didn't do it.
I don't know the exact amount that we invested in nonprofits. I feel like it's somewhere between 300 million, but I can look it up after this. But we did invest in nonprofit services. I work at a nonprofit. I can talk all day, all night about the complexity of human service reimbursement rates and workforce. But I won't. I will just defend that I think it was a smart investment.
Yeah, thanks. Now we'll just, if there are folks in the audience, I would just say, introduce yourself, say where you live, and talk loudly.
This is to Lieutenant Turnpike. Between 1991 and 2020, year 2020, but 550,000 people, more people left Connecticut or other states than moved to Connecticut. 550,000 people. According to the IRS, people weren't leaving at an especially high rate. It's just that we weren't attracting new residents. So I'm wondering, what is going to attract people to move to Connecticut? I don't know too many kids in high school who say, or in college when they graduate, I got to move to Stanford when I get out of college. They're not going to Stanford. They're going to other places with more opportunity. So what are we doing to bring companies back to Connecticut? We've seen some giant companies leave Connecticut. GE is the most prominent one, but United Technologies, others. So what's going to bring them back to the network state?
Well, I like this question because it really touches on the shift change, if you will, of the moment, the economy that we're in now. The pandemic has really accelerated that change to much more remote working, much more flexibility with a lot of workers that are no longer commuting into the city or to Boston every day. We in this district, in this town, experienced a huge influx, so much that we had to redistrict and cut off part of Easton. 30% influx. I mean, just during the pandemic. Why are people coming? For the beautiful schools, for the beautiful space, for the beautiful town community feel, for really first in country on a lot of fronts. And people, now we are creating a global workforce destination because we have parity with global paid family medical leave. We have parity with the talent that our universities, how many universities and colleges do we have that we are producing? So now we have to work on retaining that workforce and making it affordable for graduates to stay and work here.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
I think you're talking about things that are important, but the cost of living in Connecticut is so extreme that it's not attracting people and it's not attracting businesses. I think nationally, over, I don't know, like a 10-year period, the country's population went up by 7.4%. Connecticut's population headcount has not raised. Now, maybe the coastal towns, the Westports and others that are accessible to New York, maybe they can hang in. But when you start going north, things get a little tricky. And I just, how are we going to keep Connecticut competitive? Because we're not, at this point, we're really not competitive.
I think we're moving in that direction, but that's why we really looked at what are sustainable costs of living, metrics that we can help support the local economy, the local growth. How can we, relieve some of the student loan debt to have young people live and work here, raise a family here, the quality of our open spaces and our environmental, our environmental public spaces and conservation are next to none, really, up and down the coast. And public access is another issue that we're very, very proud of. I think that is changing from the GE days. I do. But I'm proud to be at the forefront of trying to attract even more workforce here and make it um, a really beautiful place that people want to be and can afford to be.
Tony, did you want to answer this?
No.
I don't dispute your numbers, Tim, at all. Historically, Connecticut's made mistakes. I spoke a little bit about sort of fiscal instability. In hard times, we raise taxes, hit businesses by surprise, hit families by surprise. Some of those tax cuts or tax increases made it unaffordable for folks of many generations to live here. But I think especially about folks my parents or grandparents' age who see Connecticut taxing their Social Security or their pension payments and decided to flee. That's a part of why this budget contains those $600 million in tax cuts to help make it more affordable for the older generation. But let's also talk about what businesses say. I love visiting businesses. One of the best parts of this job, whether it's the largest hedge fund in the world located in my district, or whether it's the tiny software shop in Ridgefield, they all say the exact same thing. They're having trouble attracting a young, diverse, tech-savvy workforce. Those words aren't mine. They were GE's CEO. And when he was asked why GE's leaving Fairfield County, he said, it's a morgue. We can't find a young, diverse, tech-savvy workforce. That's confusing, right? Because we do a really good job of educating kids. We have literally the best K through 12 schools in the entire country. We have some of the best universities in the whole country, from Yale to Wesleyan to UConn to Norwalk Community College. We churn out a few 100,000 graduates every single year, but the vast majority of them decide to pick up and start their careers elsewhere. And if you drive just down this way on Weston Road in the morning, you'll see that big, massive chartered bus that takes people from New York City every day, young people primarily, into their desk in Westport. Eventually, God forbid, but eventually companies are going to start saying, you know what, we want to locate closer to where the employees want to be. That's why we've got to figure out how to make this state more appealing to exactly the demographic you talked about, college students who are graduating and looking where to start their career. Relatedly, Connecticut has the highest student loan debt in the entire country, an average of $30,000 per head. What we decided to do in 2019 was enact a tax credit that says if you're a company and you hire a recent graduate and you keep them employed for 5 years, if you help to pay off that graduate's student loan debt up to $5,250 per year, we will give you a tax credit, a dollar for dollar reduction in your corporate tax liability. It's a win for businesses because it cuts their taxes, and it's a win for young people because all of a sudden maybe they're getting job offers in Massachusetts and Delaware and Colorado and Connecticut, but the Connecticut jobs, they all carry that student loan forgiveness benefit. We saw that it was so successful that more and more companies wanted to subscribe to this tax credit, and that's why in this most recent budget we voted to expand it so that more companies and especially small businesses can participate. I agree we've got an affordability problem. I also agree with Representative Hughes. I think that the moving vans are starting to turn around during the pandemic, and in order to sustain that growth, we've got to focus on every generation. That's why we fought for the tax cuts for seniors, and it's why we're fighting for the student loan relief for those recent grads who businesses are so desperately looking for.
I'm not going to beat up the state. I love the state. And just take a look around us. We live in a great part of the country, but we're not responsible for respecting people's tax dollars. I truly believe we tax and spend, and we continue to increase without looking at delivery efficiencies. And we have an incredible imbalance between business and labor influences. And I think the other critical part is we think about taxing our way out of problems versus creating incentives. So I'll give you an example of the budget. The budget was big, and I know Will mentioned it as there are a lot of good things in that budget, but we could have reduced taxes that are more permanent. The child care credit, the property, the earned income, these are temporary. Make note of that. They're for 1 year. The Senate Republicans, which I'm part of, said, how about we reduce sales tax? How about we create an even reduction from the large surpluses we've gotten from an inflationary cost on consumers? How about reducing sales tax that's spread across the board to allow our businesses and consumers to be able to get more earning power and be able to manage and tell government to live within your means? I think another critical factor is truly creating a hospitable business environment. And we can all work together in that. You know, businesses, there are good businesses, there are bad businesses, but we can look at different industries that are, look, we should be in the world leader in regards to the biosciences, the genomic sciences, which is a growth factor that we can multiply, like in the Durham triangle, Raleigh triangle. We need to build on that, right? And not look at just simply defense and financial services and state government as our growth engine. Okay, so I think we can all work together on a truly bipartisan basis. I think the other critical factor that I think I'm going to say that all three of us are going to agree on, our energy costs for consumers and businesses are excessive. For any of you that are getting your oil bill right now in the middle of spring, you're going to get sticker shock for having the highest utility cost in the country, perhaps second to Hawaii, which has to import their energy. That's unacceptable. So I think we're all unified as the three of us in saying, let's hold these utilities accountable, not only from a standpoint of representing their shareholders, which is important, it's a business, but you have been given a public utility trust. There's no other game in town. And these rates are absolutely unconscionable. When I hear the returns on Wall Street at record pace for our utilities, and they can't get our power on in 2 weeks, that to me is unconscionable and unacceptable. Okay, so to me, it's a factor. And I would say, I would like the feedback from both of my colleagues. We all agree, our utilities do a horrible job in regards to the delivery and cost efficiencies. And by the way, their customer service, they're terrible too.
There's
Um,
monopolies, but
I think,
I wanna-
you have a question? Yeah.
David McConaughey, Valley Forge Road, Weston. Tim, you said that the headline for the legislative session
Senator Will Haskell.
will.
No worries. That's okay.
That the headline was the tax cut, the earned income tax credits, as well as the other tax cuts. Tony, you said that, you know, the idea that some of these tax cuts are just for 1 year. Does that apply to the pension aspects, or are they continuous?
No, that's continuous.
And do you foresee that the legislature will continue to work toward that? Because along with attracting young people, and I do know some young people who've moved to Stamford because they said, well, it's actually kind of happening here in
Yeah.
Stamford.
Alive at
no,
5.
no offense to Weston, though. I mean, we're happy.
It's not New York City, but you know,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But the other piece that I continue to hear from people of my age who are retiring or reaching retirement is because of the cost of living in Connecticut, that they can't wait to leave. So I know that the pension piece will help with that, but do you see that the legislature will continue to work on reducing taxes where possible, maybe through Tony's efforts around more efficient government, but at the same time, a lot of things you talked about, the importance of spending on some of these other services, including
If I could just start, I think we can't do it by one party alone. It has to be a consensus in our priority. And I talked about it. Our budgeting needs to be about priorities. And I think the reduction on retirement income has been bandied around. We implemented it 5 years ago for our teachers. We have delayed it for the general population. And I'm really glad, and it's a compliment to the legislative body and to this governor that we have implemented it and fast tracked it. But again, it could all change next year. And as Senator Haskell said, and I appreciate him acknowledging, the Office of Fiscal Analysis, which is the state's nonpartisan budgetary analyst, right, project that we are $800 million in deficit for fiscal year 23. I know we got a rainy day fund. I know we've had record Wall Street money because our income tax structure is predicated on capital gains. But for anybody who's looked at their 401k plan this first quarter, there's a real reckoning in regards to a potential recession and the fall off cliff of federal ARPA money. What do we do then? Could that income tax supplement that we are so proudly championing go away tomorrow? The other important factor is this: we did 600 million. Kudos. Any tax cut I'll take, right? But here's the point: for the past 8 years, we've had a combined increase of taxes that added billions of dollars in structural taxation. Why have we forgotten about that? Last year, was it a year and a half ago? I lose track because it's been so frequent. We have increased taxes. So if it's one time we got surplus, great. But you know what? We're $800 million right now in deficit for fiscal year 23.
I will address that the energy costs across the board are unsustainable, and part of that is a complicated deregulation structure. We have monopolies, and but that is a big reason why we increased the solar caps on commercial and residential, and we're investing in renewables, and we've made big strides in getting our grid, our goal to renewable energy by 2040, all our public transportation onto electric by 2030. You know, we have got to lower that bar. We are the 6th oldest state in the country. You think about Florida, you think about Arizona. You don't think about Connecticut, but we are the 6th oldest state in the country. So we do need to, you know, Tony's right. Anything could happen in the future, but hell to pay if we take back what finally retirees have earned the right to, and their fixed income doesn't go up when energy costs go up. Their fixed income doesn't go up when property taxes go up. So we need to honor that and protect them. And I pledge to do so.
Amen. I'm completing now my last term in the legislature, so I won't be around to fulfill this promise, but I would say I would be shocked to see any governor, Republican or Democrat, fight to reimpose that deeply unpopular tax, which we've just finally been able to get rid of. The $600 million in tax relief, some of it's temporary, some of it's long term. It depends on the nature. I think the overall theme here is we did what we could afford. We did what we could afford while making historic investments in childcare, in schools, in $8 million for Meals on Wheels and Senior Day programming. Tony's right. No party can do this alone. I feel so lucky to count some wonderful friends on the other side of the aisle, and I put Tony in that group. But I was frustrated that some colleagues voted against the budget. The Senate Republican leader came to the floor and said, we want more tax cuts. We want to go bigger. Why have half a loaf when you can have a full loaf? I don't think that's what the expression is meant to convey. I think the expression is meant to convey that better half a loaf than no loaf at all. We did what we could afford, and hopefully in the future, the consensus, whether it's Republicans or Democrats in power in the executive branch and the legislative branch, hopefully we continue to chip away at those cost of living problems. Hopefully we continue to cut taxes whenever we can afford without undermining all the things that draw people to Connecticut, like our beautiful parks, like our beautiful schools, like our beautiful beaches, all the things that do require some level of state investment.
And by the way, the $3 billion that we paid down our unfunded pension liability frees up almost $400 million in services in our annual budget. So we have not been able to spend and invest in our HVAC and our everything in our nursing homes, for instance, because we've had to pay our debt liability. That's not a question. We can't just decide not to pay it. It's due. We need to owe it. And so paying that liability down has given some flexibility for future legislatures to make, again, sound investments while preserving that rainy day fund for the downturn that we know is going to be around the corner.
Thank you.
So I think maybe some of you don't know that Will is going to be going to law school.
Yeah.
That's your next plan? So he will not represent us for a little bit, but maybe he'll come back and after law school, we hope maybe, and consider joining the legislature again. And
Close by, out of state.
yeah.
Romantic reasons, though.
Law school's very romantic.
And then Tony, I think there's a redistricting, right? So
Yes,
something's
yes.
going to change for us with you
so
too.
You're left with
But
me.
I will offer this, and I would like to include Will, and I appreciate the collegial and the. There is no party when we're representing Weston, and we both represent Westport as well. We work together on the behalf of the interests, and I think I would offer to say, even though redistricting moves me out of the district, how could you spend 6 years, 7 years representing a community, know the unique aspects of it, and then all of a sudden say no? We didn't need to be here because obviously we're not impacted by the vote. But you know what? As we said earlier, it's a privilege to represent the community. It's an engaged community. The questions from third graders and up has been very thoughtful, and the league has done a great job. So you can count me always continuously as a supporter of Weston. And First Selectwoman Nestor has been very engaged and
I'm still
inclusive.
calling you.
Absolutely, and we take the
If
call
you're
on the
on
well
the
water.
Senate floor,
So
you're still
I can't
getting
speak
my
for
call.
Will, but I know for both of us, even when he's in law school, the reality is you don't leave a part that has been such a significant part of your life or my life that we're always here to help.
Excellent. Well, and
Did
I
you say
think
that?
so. We've got a little bit more time for maybe a couple more questions. So yeah, go ahead and introduce who you are and where you live.
Martin Mulder, 10 Hydridge Road. We have a trifecta up here. Question. This might be a fourth grade question, Tony. Why would the state legislate for affordable housing and then allow all the towns to opt out of it? And I guess for towns who choose to opt out of it, will there be any enforcement, or can towns, small towns, just basically ignore this issue?
That's a great question.
Yeah, are you talking about the last legislative session, not this one, right? Because we didn't really pass anything this year. Do you want to talk about it? I mean, we've been at these forums.
The bill you're talking about, I'm embarrassed to say, 6178 last year, which is nothing related to affordable housing. It relates to planning and zoning, code changes, and municipal engagement with local control versus the state mandates. So that's important. And there were a number of different goals that you're looking to achieve. I think one of them was the Commission on Connecticut's Development and Future, which encompassed probably about 65 members. I'm on a membership that's looking at a whole comprehensive aspect of housing, model codes, and doesn't talk about A30G, but talks about planning and zoning's relationship dynamic. When you talk about the opt-out, the challenge has always been the delicate balance between the legislative role of the state mandating versus local municipal input and control. And what the compromise ultimately was to get it passed and to even get it through both chambers is the fact that the opt-out affords my local municipal governments, convened either by the Board of Selectmen or your government council, to say, right now, we're not going to do this. But we also have requirements that you now need by June 30th this year, a 5-year affordable housing task force. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think another thing, and it's not just about affordable housing, it's really striking a delicate balance between state mandated control versus local input and control. I am a believer that our local elected bodies in the Board of Selectmen or Planning and Zoning should have input in policies that affect citizens. Another example, I'm not a affordable housing is when we passed the cannabis marijuana bill, we also gave our municipalities an opt-out, right? And how many of our municipalities have taken that? So it's a delicate balance as a legislature to respect local municipal control versus the state's idea of creating mandates that it knows better than the local people that it represents.
Martin, yeah, and I was just wanting to clarify, are you asking about how then do towns like Weston really deal with creatively the need for affordable or workforce or single parent family households?
Or all of the above? And when you choose not to, will there be any enforcement, year 1, year 2, year 5, year ever?
Yeah, there's not really enforcement, but again, like Tony was saying, the state's trying to prompt our communities to deal with the real need. Prompt the communities more through. Okay, there's a mandate to have a plan. It's like you got to get together and come up with your plan. What are you town proposing to do, and have town input about how you're going to address this need. It is a need across our state. We do live in one of the most segregated and unaffordable states in the country, with the biggest disparities in housing. And unfortunately, that carries over to schools and health disparities too. I wish that our towns across Connecticut could say that wherever you go to school, you'd have the same quality public education, but that's just not true. So where you live happens to determine a lot of health outcomes and what your access to affordable housing is. And how do we come together as a state and determine that town by town while giving local control? And so there isn't really a penalty, except that if you're not compliant with 830G, which this doesn't really address, a developer could challenge you in court over it. And it doesn't really address that. That's still the statute left over that we're living with for 30 years.
Martin, the only thing I can think to add, thank you for the question. We talk about people moving out of Connecticut, not enough people moving into Connecticut. It's not a coincidence that we came in dead last out of 50 states for the number of new housing units created over the last 6 years. We're not creating very much housing, whether you call it affordable housing or whether it's workforce housing that's market rate, housing for seniors who want to downsize, housing for recent graduates who want to start their careers here. There aren't a lot of options in Connecticut. With the legislation Tony referenced a moment ago, allowed was for increased usage of accessory dwelling units. Right? If in my opinion, if you have a pool cottage or an in-law apartment above your garage, you should be able to rent that out. Maybe it won't count as affordable housing. You'll determine what you want to rent it out as. But in my view, that's a fundamental property right. I know I'm a Democrat and I'm sounding a little bit like a Republican, but why should the government tell you what to do with that apartment or that cottage on your property? We wanted to create an easier process for people to utilize accessory dwelling units. And it's been popular in some towns across the state. Some towns have decided to opt out, Weston being one of them. And I understand and respect that decision. But what I was told by some folks, like some friends on the P&Z committee, is that they're opting out so that they can opt in, so that they can.
Yeah, there's options, right?
Yeah. The hope is that Weston will move towards a world in which accessory dwelling units are available, maybe not according to the specifications that the state sets up, but perhaps specifications set forward by the locality. Just it's fine to, I think, say no but, and perhaps that's what some towns are doing around here. Increasing usage of accessory dwelling units. It's not going to solve our housing crisis, but it'll create just a handful of more opportunities for teachers and young graduates and retirees to be able to afford to actually live in communities like this one. And it'll do that without changing the look of the community at all, right? It's not building a big apartment building. It just, you're not going to know. I wouldn't know if my neighbor happened to have a teacher living out of their in-law garage apartment.
Will, if I may.
Yeah.
I can offer additional context as the ranking on planning and development, which has cognizance over that area. Let's be clear. We need more affordable, accessible, and diverse housing, not only in Weston, but in Hartford, in our rural areas. I mentioned Scotland, which is actually a town in eastern Connecticut. So let be perfectly clear. We have a housing needs crisis in the state of Connecticut. The difference is the solution. I have always believed that it should be a collaboration between local leaders like First Selectwoman Nestor, with our local planning and zoning boards, with our state governance. The Department of Housing's commissioner is an absolute gem to work with, but it also needs to incorporate the federal government in a collaborative effort that all three work together to create affordable and diverse and accessible housing stock. Unfortunately, the current model is private developers in being able to take advantage of some of the law. And you've gotten such emotional responses. And I know this is probably one thing Will is not going to miss about the legislature is the fact that you have that hammer of 830G impacting communities, disregarding people's personal property rights, a community's master plan and design. Weston and Easton, which I also represent with Ann, is nearly, I don't know what Weston's exact percentage, but I know in Easton, it's nearly 80% watershed. I'm an avid and environmental champion. That, right? There is a real concern in regards to septic capacity and real concern about environmental impact of density. The best way we can do it is to collaborate with all the parties involved. And I'm always reminded, and David here earlier mentioned he's in Valley Forge. How many people remember there was actually a village of Valley Forge? But they didn't have a say when our power companies decided, the water company decided to flood that village and convert it into a reservoir. Again, I'm not a happy fan of my utilities, but I'm also concerned that when we take away local control and allow the state to say, you know best, and one size fits all, we run a very, very dangerous pathway to just irreparably change communities. And I'm not saying to exclude and not acknowledge social equity concerns. No doubt. We want a diverse community that incorporates and articulates from our youngest people, from I'm an Asian American, from all racial groups, religious groups, and all age segments to have a great and diverse community. But you know what? If we're putting our head in the sand and saying one way or the other, we're never going to go anywhere. Look, 830G is well intentioned, it's over 30 years old. Did it fulfill its mission? No,
No.
not at all. Both sides can agree, but we're not going to change it.
Why don't you explain what 832 is?
830G is indeed not a four-letter dirty word, okay? It is Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-30G, which addresses affordable housing. It originated over 30 years ago on a blue ribbon panel, diverse party, socioeconomics, academic, and developers that said, in order for us to be able to meet our housing needs, this isn't a new problem, that we are saying that if a community does not meet 30% of its general housing stock relative to its population, 830G can be used as a tool to implement housing stock. But the problem with 830G, it's a hammer. There is no exception to an 830G application except on the issue of public safety. So, right next door, you can file 830G because Weston does not meet the 30% requirement. You can buy that house and file an 830G application and put a 10-story building. And if you don't think that's possible, let's hope it never happens, but that and our planning and zoning board will have no say other than traffic safety and density concerns in regards to fire access. That's the only exception. There isn't even an environmental consideration. Again, we need to do a better job. We need to create affordable, diverse, and accessible housing. But just imagine that. That wouldn't work.
How many years has ACG been in place?
30 years.
30, yeah. It's an inelegant
Well put.
statute, inelegant. And I believe that it has generated the conversation in communities like ours, all across the state, to get creative so that there is some momentum to adapting that to the landscape that we currently find ourselves, and the public will. The public will to address it in the local communities. I think that will is here in Weston. I'm very proud to represent you.
So it is 4:11.
Oh.
But I think maybe we could have one final question, because I think I saw someone who's been wanting to ask a
Well,
question
we
for a
can
while.
open up
So
and have pies.
and then you know,
Only if you sign up
afterwards.
as a league member.
Or we
Yeah,
can buy it.
exactly. And afterwards, I don't know.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I don't know your schedules, so but you might be
We'll
able to
hang out
ask
for
your
some minutes,
question
sure.
directly too. So but please go ahead and what's your name and where do you live?
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And the league appreciates that too.
What can we expect for the growth, economic growth, and what policies can we expect that will expand Connecticut's economy and sort of build on the momentum?
I wish he was here so you could ask him that, because he was really accountable to you. You know, he hears that the public is clamoring for relief right now. So I think he's really trying to, you know, put the public's will first and meet that need. But economic growth is right behind that relief, and we cannot do it without really a unified legislature that's behind that economic. I mean, I'm a big fan of equity too. Like, you know, like I don't want certain sectors to have all the growth. I want everyone to have a viable economic future, especially families whose kids are in, you know, inequitable circumstances and at risk. So I feel like we have deliberately disinvested in some of those sectors that maybe you're alluding to, and it's a time to, when we have a you know, surplus, when we have a rainy day fund, to invest in our economic growth.
Oh, sorry, Tony, go ahead. I wouldn't presume to speak for the governor except on an issue that I've talked to him a lot about. So I'm going to make a narrow exception on one topic, and that's transportation. This is a governor that from day one, really from his campaign trail, has said that you can't have a well-functioning economy if Connecticut residents can't get where they need to go. I've talked ad nauseum today about the speed of our train lines, but it's not just that. Traffic. Stamford area drivers spend 47 hours a year in traffic. That's an environmental disaster because it results in more carbon emissions, and it's an economic disaster because companies are not excited about setting up shop if their employees can't commute efficiently. So the governor's proposed an $8 billion plan called Time for Connecticut. I love that name because it's not just about getting people to work, it's about giving them their time back, right? If we can save commuters just 7 minutes next year on their Metro North trip by making it a little bit faster, 7 minutes every day, that adds up to hours every year that they're going to be able to spend with their loved ones, getting home just in time to put their kids to bed or to have dinner with their family. The governor's put forward some really, I encourage you to check out the Time for CT plan. We just passed 2 weeks ago $75 million to improve traffic signals, because too many of our traffic signals the vast majority of them are 20 years old. They operate only on a timer system. The governor's a big believer in the fact that traffic signals should actually be responsive to the flow of vehicles. How many times have we sat unnecessarily waiting because there's
going by and we're sitting there?
Exactly. Other states have made this investment. We put 75 million in. The governor's putting 8 billion into the Time for CT plan. There's a lot of great things to say about this administration, but I get most excited and fired up about their plans to get our state moving again.
First, the governor should have Will as a surrogate going around the state. Look, let me be clear. The governor is a good person. He has been respectful and engaging. I truly believe he is a good person. And to answer the question, whoever is the governor, and this is the beauty of our democracy, you get the vote, right? So there's no foregone conclusion, but I do believe whoever is the governor has a tall task. I think we all share the same goals and the same priorities. The devil is in the details of execution and philosophy. And I think that's where people need to find out and learn more. Listen, no one is ever as good as those commercials say, and no one's ever as bad as the attack ads say,
commercial.
right? But the reality is you have an opportunity. And all three of us believe in greater voter access. The league obviously supports it, but the increased voter access also asks of you the responsibility of being an informed electorate and not simply look at a label as saying, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, that's the way I'm voting, right? The reality is be informed. So whoever is going to be governor has an incredible challenge to work with the legislature to install commissioners and create a better Connecticut for all. Because look, no one is cheering for a governor to fail. Because when he or she fails, we bear the brunt of it. So again, it's maybe a good closure of thanking the league, but ultimately, this is the great thing about democracy, right? You get to you hear viewpoints, but I want to compliment the governor for his civility and being a gentleman in sometimes a very, how would I say it, sometimes hard-hitting game of politics.
Well,
Policy
I want to thank everyone for being very civil today, and I want to thank State Representative Ann Hughes. I want to thank State Senator Will Haskell and wish him well as he heads off to law school.
He's
And
still representing
State Senator
until
Tony Wong, I hope
January.
you come back often and visit.
I'm going to go to Lily's Market.
All
Go
right,
visit
good.
Lily's
Yeah,
Market.
Thank you, everybody.